On Capitol Hill, Congress is debating police reform. And the big question in my notebook is, can Republicans and Democrats cut through the gridlock and make a deal? There are some differences between the proposals we've seen. Here's what you need to know real quick. The House Democrats' bill bans no-knock warrants in federal drug cases and the use of chokeholds by police. It also creates a federal database of police misconduct. The Senate GOP plan would use federal funds to incentivize police departments to expand the use of body cameras and discourage the use of chokeholds. It would also require departments to report the use of deadly force. So you see some overlapping ideas there, but a different discussion and implementation. Geoff, is President Trump going to lean in during election season, campaign season, to support Senator Scott's bill and try to get legislation forward?
Well, it's interesting. Will President Trump do it? Likely not. Will the White House? Perhaps. And when I say the White House, I mean Jared Kushner and Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. What's interesting about the two bills is that civil rights advocates who have consulted with Democrats and Republicans as they both sort of try to distill their different approaches, they've told me that the Democratic approach focuses on accountability and the Republican approach focuses on de-escalation. Now, the question is, when Senate Republicans bring up this bill, will Democrats stop it? I mean, that's a huge political question they have to grapple with, because Democrats don't want to be seen obstructing which right now looks like a good faith effort on the part of Republicans to do something, at least something, about this issue of excessive and in some cases lethal use of force by police. So we could have an answer to that question as early as next week when the Senate takes up this issue, Bob.
Josh, what does your reporting tell you about how President Trump's going to move forward? He's done the executive order. What now?
Well, the president has vacillated through different times saying that he would support some sort of police reform, and at other times he's done his kind of cri de coeur of law and order. You notice when he had the executive order signing last week, he was surrounded by police officers. And there's a powerful constituency that wants, tougher law and order, who does not necessarily even want some of these things among his base and among his supporters. So whether or not, as Geoff said, of Jared Kushner and Mark Meadows and others can convince the president to put together a fulsome effort on this, it's kind of hard to know. But I think we'll see a lot more tomorrow night with what tone he strikes at the rally in Tulsa, Bob, how the president comes out, how he presents himself, and whether he seems to be trying to do something different, or if he goes back to kind of his usual rhetorical tactics.
Susan, what's your read on all of this? Is this just positioning politically, or do you see something actually in the works here?
Mike, here's the question in my mind. Is this like gun control? After Sandy Hook and Parkland, those terrible tragedies, there was real impetus to have some gun legislation, which did not work out. Gridlock is always the safe bet in Washington, but maybe there's something else going on here. You don't have to look at the polls to know that there is a lot of impetus in districts and states across the country on police reform. You just have to look at what politicians in Washington are doing. The decision by Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, to schedule the consideration of Tim Scott's bill next week is a real shift on his part. It's a sign that that Republicans are feeling the heat on this. So I think it is possible, not likely maybe, but possible, there's actually bipartisan action in an election year. That'd be a remarkable thing.
Yamiche, you spoke with some of the family members of those who have been affected directly by police brutality. Do they feel involved enough in these discussions?
The families that I talked to who sat with President Trump for about an hour say that the president, while he seemed sympathetic to their stories, which of course include people being killed by the police on camera, people dying mysteriously in prisons, the president listened to those stories intently, but they feel like the president's executive order didn't go far enough. They feel like in that meeting, the president used a lot of platitudes. That was a quote that was attributed to the brother of Everett Palmer, who died in a Pennsylvania jail. He told me that the president was saying things like, that person must have been a great person, and this is really terrible. He was promising federal reviews of each case. But that person and those families came away thinking the president has kind words, but, quote, we're past kind words, we need action. So they feel like the president, while he's listening to these families, isn't really taking into consideration their ideas, and especially when it comes to qualified immunity, which is a legal doctrine that shields a lot of officers and officials from being sued because of their conduct or alleged misconduct. The president and the White House say that's a non-starter. These families spent a long time talking to the president, pushing him to say, look, you really need to look into this issue. The president didn't budge. So a lot of these families also, I should say, added that they didn't want to be put in a position to be photographed with President Trump. They said they didn't want to be used as props, quote, because they said they think that the president would have claimed victory with a sea of black and brown faces behind him. So the families here are really sensitive to the fact that the president seems like he might be interested in doing something, but they don't feel like he's going far enough.
Josh, jump in here. I see you want to jump in.
Well, that's a whole conundrum here is, as he said, with gun control, with so many other issues, healthcare, the White House has said, we're inclined to do something. And at the end of the day, some of these things just haven't come through. And I think Yamiche's point is correct that no one quite knows how much seriousness the White House is going to put behind this. And, if the political climate and the protest and the current environment continues this way for, weeks and months on end, there may be forced to, actually do something more substantive that some of the advocates and some of the families want. But I think, as the other panelists have said, it really remains time will tell whether anything substantive happens here and whether the president's actually serious about doing something that bridges Democrats and Republicans. As you know, Bob, and we've reported many, many times, Republicans in a lot of ways take the president's lead. They don't want to be crosswise with him, particularly in election year. A lot of these senators, a lot of these House members really look to his tweets, they look to his statements, they look to his public proclamations on what they will do. And it will be curious to see, if he gives folks enough cover to do something meaningful.
Geoff, just to finish where we began, this is Juneteenth. You've reported on the significance of Tulsa in American history, what happened in 1921. You've reported on Black Wall Street. Just tell me more about that as we finish this program tonight.
Well, it's interesting. I think we're living right now through a racial awakening, really a racial reckoning, an era of transformational change. This country has seen a number of eras of transformational change. The question is, will this be the era that some of the pressure and the passion can be turned into policy? And to your question about what happened in Tulsa, 99 years ago, this month, you had what was known as Black Wall Street. It was this beacon of black life, an enclave in Tulsa known as the Greenwood District. Had a black bank, black schools, black hospitals, a black savings and loan, a flourishing center of economic activity. And angry white mobs attacked the city over 2 days, killed 300 African Americans, left tens of thousands of African Americans homeless. But the story of Black Wall Street doesn't end there, because the folks in the Greenwood District, Bob, they rebuilt it. They rebuilt that town. And so that, to me, is instructive. That gives me hope, and hopefully the country can learn something from what happened almost 100 years ago as we move forward.